All right, we are back. I just needed to quickly swap a battery on the camera there because we're going a little longer than we usually do here on our podcast.
Oh my gosh.
So next race that we have up, which we just watched,
So good.
was Silverstone.
So interesting.
Silverstone.
Oh, the Brits.
And this is the one that's really like causing a lot of different conversations to be happening. So I guess, well, for several different reasons. First being, like from the very start, is
Sprint quali.
we did sprint quali for the first time, and it
I didn't hate
sucks
it.
because we didn't really like talk about it much beforehand, and now we're gonna talk about it after we've seen it and everything. But originally, I was like a little like, I didn't know what to think about it for a lot of different reasons because I thought like mostly. Like, I think it's like, the way I looked at it is I was like, it's a mini race before the race to determine the grid for the actual race. And there's a lot of things that happen during like a race, especially the first like lap and the first turn, like we were just talking about, that can like knock you out, like which isn't it may not necessarily be fair. And if you get knocked out, it sucks and da-da-da. So I get it. I get what they're trying to do, like make it more interesting for the fans and stuff. But I'm like, as a driver, I don't know if the risk is really worth it. And if you get into some huge kind of crash and sprint, it could knock you out of actually racing the next race. But it was fun to actually watch like a race. Like it's almost like watching two races in a weekend, which was really interesting.
I think like my opinion on sprint quali is more similar to what it was. I was happy about the change. Like I'm happy to always see like what F1 wants to do because the only way that you get to new things or to make things better is by changing. I know everyone's like, oh, don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I was kind of along the same vein. But the reason I don't like it still is because one thing that kind of gets to me is like the 2022 racing is meant to be more affordable for all drivers and all teams. And how I feel is that sprint quali is kind of like the billionaire's hobby. Like you could wreck your car in quali. I'm not saying that, but when you're racing, these drivers and even the commentators stated it, these racers, like when you like put them in racing or like side by side, like that's just their intuition. They just want to go racing. They just want to go fast. So you're putting these people in their like primal habitat to do what they are kind of born to do or what they want to do. And so if you incur damage to your car, you can't do a pit stop.
Yeah.
If you incur damage to your car, that's money. If you total your car, let's say in an accident, which we, thank goodness, didn't see during this sprint quali, it's kind of backhanded way of Formula One to have the billionaire racing, but also try to make it more budget friendly. Like Williams may not have the ability to get the car back to where it needs to be by the start of the race versus like Mercedes might be able to work all night and they have the money that they're capable of doing it. So I feel like sprint quali for right now is fine, but the issue I am going to have is like if there is damage and it's like a lot of damage, that's just backwards. Like what are we trying to do with the sport? We're trying to make it more budget friendly or more applicable to more teams, but we're not being inclusive. And then that's going to mean that they're not going to race as hard, which means that, again, the top teams with the most money are going to be able to race.
I don't think I fully understand the purpose of sprint quali.
It's truly just so that they can have a weekend of things instead of that's what the point was listed as.
I don't understand the point of it entirely. I understand what they're saying they want to do with it, but I don't understand because, quite frankly, it puts your drivers at risk. It causes more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not instability, but just more variables. Yeah. There's just more, and I'm talking about in terms of like cars getting wrecked and drivers and different things happening. Like it adds more variables. I think a lot of people are pretty happy with the existing quali format. I don't know why you would introduce I mean, I do know what they're. I feel like the only reason they're introducing it is because they want to give something thrilling for the fans to watch. But I think that's kind of all it does. I don't think it accomplishes anything for the drivers. I don't think it accomplishes anything for the teams. I don't think it really necessarily accomplishes anything for Formula One as a sport.
I mean, it does accomplish things for the teams in the way that it's kind of like, you know, when things are on sale and then you end up buying more. It does accomplish something for the teams and the drivers because they get points if you're in the top 3.
Sure, but yeah, I guess they gotta incentivize it somehow. But I just think I think for fans it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think for drivers and teams, I think it has more cons than pros.
I agree. No, I think as a fan, it was great to have lights out and away we go twice in a weekend.
Yeah.
17 laps and then, you know, however many that there were yesterday. Like, it was amazing. But I don't know. I felt like from somebody who has been watching the sport for only a couple years, like with the stance that F1's trying to make in terms of making it more equal for the teams, I don't
more
see it.
competitive.
Yeah, I don't see it. And like we saw it in this sprint quali, you know, just jumping right in.
But the interesting thing is like, and this is another interesting thing with sprint quali, is some teams might like it. In this case, Red Bull will like it because Hamilton qualified in regular qualification on pole, but he lost sprint quali to Max Verstappen, and Max Verstappen took pole. So I know it's a new concept and everything, but depending on what team you are and how your car is doing, because yes, like Mercedes can qualify on pole, but when it comes to straight up racing,
not this year.
Not at least this year, yeah. Given everything goes well and nothing happens, like Verstappen will get his number, you know?
I just think that with that being said, what truly happened during this sprint quali is that like Sainz lost out like by a lot, and Perez lost out by everything. He was up in the points for quali, and then he was down in P20, and he couldn't even go into the pit lane. Like, it's not even like a typical race. Like and I think
I don't
that
know what
there's
to think about that.
I think that there's certain things like they've lifted Parc Fermé because if you incur damage during sprint quali, like of course you need to be able to correct your car, but it just didn't settle right. And it's not because it was Sainz, and it's not because it was Perez, or if it had been Max or Lewis. It's simply because I see what Cam said earlier. Like, if you go through the first lap of the race without any damage or any like crashes or any issues,
miracle.
It's a miracle. And you're basically subjecting these drivers to do that twice, and you're subjecting teams that are getting smaller because they're trying to be more financially responsible with how they're distributing their funds. You're making those mechanics and the engineers work that much harder, and I don't see the benefit in that sense. These women and men are already losing sleep the night before the race. Like, they don't need to be up repairing a car.
I would be really curious to hear from I don't know if the teams are actually outwardly talking about it. I'm sure behind closed doors they have their own opinions about sprint quali and what they think of it. But I haven't really heard anything publicly from the teams.
They just said it was kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's the very politically correct answer to give. Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
You know how if someone were to ask you something, it was fun, right? It's like, what else are they really gonna say?
So that was sprint quali.
But they're gonna do it a few more times.
They
this
are
year.
2 more times this year.
So let's just see how that goes. I don't think 3 times is enough to really judge whether it's I think they need to do it at least 5 to 8 times to be is this a thing we want to keep going? Because 3 times is I don't know. We'll see. Whatever. We'll see what happens. We'll see if it sticks around.
So ending out sprint quali, we had Max in P1 and Lewis in P2.
And Bottas P3. Leclerc P4. Good for him. Norris P5. And back at it, your boy Ricardo in 6.
He qualified, and this is somebody that does great on sprint quali more than he does on quali. I'll be honest. He does well. He races better than he qualifies.
Yeah.
Perez, I kind of feel like that sometimes too. He races better than he qualifies, because we've seen Perez up in P2, P3, but he doesn't always qualify up there.
Or maybe some of the guys who qualify better than they race.
Yeah, like Russell.
Yeah.
He was in P10.
I think it's, it's probably coming from both sides. It's probably both of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand, but I mean, I would never be okay with like a reverse grid. I just think that's stupid. They've, they've tried to talk about doing that before.
But to that point I just made, some people race better than qualify, some people qualify better than they race. Maybe that's what sprint quality is there to do, to even it out more. Because the guys who qualify at the top but don't race as well may like lose those spots. The sprint quali, you get what I mean? Sprint quali might even it out.
I thought about that, but when I looked at the numbers and when I looked at the people itself, it was still like the top 10 were just shuffled, and the bottom 10 were just shuffled.
But that's what I mean, though. The top 10 will shuffle.
I just feel
and maybe that shuffling is what they're trying to do.
It's alright. I don't know. I just for me it wasn't like it was like great as a fan to watch it twice. But I vote no.
Or how about this? And I was bringing this up to you before, is like the cream always rises to the top, right? Mm-hmm. Are they just separating the cream more so with sprint quali? That's what I think might happen. Yeah. Is like you get regular qualifications and people who may do a little better but drop down in the race. When you do sprint after that, you just drop them down first.
Yeah.
And you let the guys in the first places
I understand
get more of a gap.
I understand that, and I think it's interesting no matter what. It's honestly the financial part of it that really bothers me, to be brutally honest. Like I just feel like in quali, like there's less accidents, there's less ability for, and there are drivers that like Leclerc wrecked his car, of course, back in Monaco.
It's Monaco.
But it's like you have to just understand that if you're gonna do both quali and sprint quali, it's just like a lot. Yeah. You're basically putting these guys through like double financial stress and double overall stress versus they're just the F1 is like saying that practice isn't fun enough for the normal population to watch.
Yeah, but it's practice.
I like it.
I mean, practice is not fun, but you don't go to watch practice for fun.
You go for the insight.
I feel like practice is more for the drivers, not for us.
No, and it's for, the commentators, like the insight. I like to hear everything that Crofty and everyone says.
That is like, I was telling Priya, if you guys ever want to listen to like kind of an interesting, like almost like a podcast, like just listen to practice. They talk about anything and everything F1 related.
You'll get
driver
insight.
Development, different types of things. It's actually, sometimes I just have it on and listen to it just to hear the commentators talk about like different things going on in F1 and things like that.
Well, let's jump into the race, Cam.
Do you want to do this?
I was so frustrated. Anyone who was watching our Instagram stories yesterday, or more so Cam's because I was yelling in the background of his.
So I guess should I just give a little bit of the recap there, and then you can kind of throw it in. So we started, obviously, as we had mentioned, the grid with Verstappen, Hamilton, sequentially, Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas, Leclerc, Norris, Ricciardo. The race starts, Verstappen gets away, and they're racing through the first few corners, and Hamilton and Verstappen are having like a great battle. It was some really intense, like really amazing racing. And then we get into Copse corner, and what happens is Verstappen has the lead, and they're going through the corner, and there's a collision between Lewis and Verstappen. Lewis hits Verstappen's rear right with his front left tire, and it sends Verstappen spinning into a wall, and he sustains a 51G impact into the wall, and he walks away, and he's okay. They had to take him to hospital. He
doesn't walk away.
Well, he got out of the car.
Hobbles.
I mean, walking, when they say you walk away, it means like he wasn't like dead or broke anything. Like he walked away from the car, thankfully. They put him in an ambulance and took him to a hospital for checks and everything, because it was he said that he was feeling like incredibly dizzy and winded from the impact, which could obviously signal when you have a impact of that magnitude, like they do have to check you for a concussion at that point. So he was taken to the hospital for those checks to get checked out and everything.
So just as a quick side, actually he was taken to Silverstone Medical Center first, which is actually at the Silverstone racetrack. And then from there, his doctors made the decision to send him to a nearby hospital, and he was helicoptered to a nearby hospital. Yeah. So he was evaluated, and how a concussion works is it's kind of like you have to exclude everything else before it's a concussion, because you have to make sure that there wasn't any other trauma. You have to make sure that everything else kind of checks out. You can sustain, breakages to your ribs. You can sustain bruising to your ribs. For anyone who didn't see it, Max kind of got out of the car very slowly, very gingerly.
That was a little scary.
It was odd to see, because I've seen Max come out of crashes
that crash
before.
Was scary, actually, from start to finish.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
He got out of this crash, and and I hate to make this like a point of whatever, but he literally got out of the car, and he bent down, and he kind of just took a breath in, and it's as if he was securing himself against his knees. And I remember I looked at Cam, and I was like, he's not okay. He very gingerly got out of the car, and to me, what that signals, obviously working in the field, is that these guys are incredibly well trained. Like, they train their bodies well. You've probably seen Lewis Hamilton on his Instagram, Pierre Gasly, Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen. They lift weights. They show that they do different G-forces to within like simulated areas. They do
like
strength training of their neck.
Stuff,
they do more than a normal athlete would probably do. And to see this young man who's so healthy, who races so well, get out of the car that way, that was really hard, I think, just for any person of F1 to watch. Any fan, doesn't matter if you're Lewis, Lando, Daniel, Latifi, Mazepin, whoever you are. So that being said, he was taken to the hospital after the doctors there stated that he needed to go get checked out, and he was there for quite a while. He actually wasn't released until 2,200 hours in England, which is quite a long time.
Yeah.
He got
10 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of England's like their healthcare and stuff. All of that aside, I mean, I'm sure he was getting the best of the best care.
Yeah. So that happened, and there was a lot of debate back and forth. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner were both like pretty, like, they had their opinions. Obviously, those guys are their drivers.
Well, what ended up happening? First off, just like, what was the penalty?
So the penalty was a 10-second penalty to Lewis for the collision, and the stewards gave the reason that Lewis was going wide of the apex, and Max had the racing line, and for that reason he was going to get the penalty in that case. And it did go back and forth. I mean, for me personally, when I was talking, at least when we saw this and we were talking about it, that's what I saw. I saw that Verstappen was, well, first of all, this is how I said it. I was like, it was the first lap, Verstappen was leading, and he had the racing line. And I think for those three reasons, and they're going into a turn. So all those things. First lap, he was leading, he had the racing line, and they're going into a turn. 4 reasons I believe that if you are a driver behind the driver in first place with all those 4 things present, you have to concede the position, in my opinion. And I think the stewards probably saw it the same way. And I think that's why they gave Lewis the penalty. And there's going to be a lot of debate back and forth whether or not he deserves a penalty for that. But I think given the reason that he hit Max and sent him off the track, I agree with...
I don't know our schedule.
Anyway, sorry, we are back. I had to my memory card went out for this one. We're recording... I started recording these in 4K, which is stupid. I'm going to just go back to HD because...
Sometimes
you guys
maybe
don't.
Good, sometimes maybe
shit. Yeah, there's no reason you guys need to be watching these in 4K on YouTube, but...
If you understood that meme at us, I need to know that someone else understands that. It is the funniest thing.
Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit.
It's so applicable. It's so funny.
How was our podcast? Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. Okay, anyway.
So our podcast is never shit. So what I was saying was about the penalties, specifically what I was actually going to get to, is I have a couple of thoughts on this, but feel free to interrupt me because I don't want to go on forever.
Okay.
My thought process on the penalty itself was, this is kind of how I worked through it. I went through like 5 stages. yesterday of like grief and, you know, like anger and then finally some type of acceptance. And I don't know what the other two ones were in between about this penalty. I believe that you can't gauge a penalty, a punishment, based on the result of the poor behavior or the rule indiscretion. So what I mean by that is if you, in this case, if you push someone off the racing line and you cause a major accident where it takes the driver out, I feel like you have to do that as a punishment. And you have to just figure out what the punishment is for taking that driver out and being the reason that they got pushed off the line. And back to what Cam said, I really truly feel that Max had the line there. He had the racing line, he was ahead, they were going into a turn. It was all going in his favor. I heard a lot of great opinions and great just viewpoints that, well, they were both driving at it and one could have backed out. Yes,
true.
Max could have backed out, but Lewis was not ahead. And everyone asked me like, well, you know, you're so up Max's butt. Like, would you believe the same if it was Lewis versus Max and Lewis was ahead?
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
I actually would. And that's why even in the last race that we just discussed in Austria, when Perez, who I adore, kind of drove Leclerc off the racing track twice. I mean, I agree. Like, what were you doing, Perez? And if that had caused a major accident, yeah, I probably would have given him like a harder punishment. The problem that I'm having is that when Lewis has done this to, let's say, Albon.
Yep.
He ruined the race of Albon. Was he given any penalty for that?
I think the reason here, though, he was given the penalty is because quite honestly, because Verstappen crashed so hard.
But the reason
if he just spun him out,
I
think it would have been just a racing incident. But the fact that he hit the wall at 51 Gs, do you have any idea how crazy the Red Bull team would have gone on them if they didn't give Hamilton any? Horner would have lost his mind.
They have over $1 million over $1 million worth of damage, if not 2 million, because Max's car is wrecked. But on that same thought, let me just kind of complete this process. I don't feel that you can ever justify, your punishment is never going to equal the poor behavior. It will never equal it. It's not like jail. It's not like, it's like you can't equate them. But you have to have defense mechanisms in place so that drivers don't have poor reactions, so that they don't drive poorly, so that they don't drive dangerously or aggressively to the point where it's in their favor to push somebody off the road and then be able to continue on with their race. And what I mean by that is a 10-second penalty for another driver not being able to complete the race is nothing, especially in a Mercedes. And I'm not just saying, oh, Mercedes should be given worse punishments because they're Mercedes. I feel in this case the punishment did not equal the problem because, one, Lewis should have known better. He should have backed out. He was second.
Yes.
Two,
okay.
I feel that one thing a couple people brought up to me is like a drive-through penalty, which obviously eats more time, where you have to go through the pit lane. That I would have agreed with, because you have to give a reason for Hamilton to not do this again, or for any driver. Perez, in the other one, still got ahead of Leclerc. He probably would still want to push someone off the road.
He didn't hit Leclerc.
He didn't hit Leclerc.
Leclerc just went wide.
I'm just saying, like, it doesn't really, it incentivizes certain drivers to be like, well, I can come back from a 10-second penalty and not get points on my license, and also not get brought to the stewards to my attention, and everything is fine. And so for that reason, I just didn't agree that it was a simple racing incident because of the way that everything happened. And then on top of it, I just didn't think 10 seconds was sufficient. But the reason I'm like talking so much about it is because I've heard a lot of people be like, well, it's never going to be sufficient. It's never going to be enough. Max is out of the big lead of championship. But the punishment isn't going to equal the consequence. It's just going to be enough to deter. What's the point? To deter drivers from doing it again.
I think in F1 though, anytime you force another driver off the track or crash or make them crash in some kind of way when they're in the lead, no punishment is going to fit
Right.
the crime.
That's what I'm saying.
In that case, like, for all intents and purposes, given Verstappen had the faster car and given what we've seen over the past few races, he would have won the race. There's no punishment you can give Lewis.
Right.
That's like
Equal to that.
equal, other than, I mean, they don't have these punishments that exist, but like completely like just giving him 0 points and telling him to retire the car. But they don't do that in F1. The thing is like, cooler heads always prevail, right? And like, I've thought about this, and like, obviously the day of the race, I was like really like hot on like Lewis, and I was pissed that this happened to Verstappen. I was like, I had this, like, for the same reasons that I listed, like those 4 reasons, like I felt that he should have conceded. However, when you're looking at the actual race itself, like, you can't discount that. And I'm like not, I'm going bad on Lewis for another reason, which I'll talk about. But in the heat of the moment when you're racing, it's racing. These guys are going so fast, their heart's beating, their adrenaline's pumping. It's so hard to kind of, his gut instinct is to like try to make the turn, or I don't know if only him and God will know if he purposely hit Verstappen. But obviously we'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. But when you're dealing with something so fast, it's obviously, you know, what these guys do is make quick judgments very quickly, but you know, they are human at the end of the day, and it's obviously going to be hard for him. He didn't know which way Verstappen was going to go. You know, Verstappen's like turning in, and I don't know. It is what it is. So I kind of can understand things from Lewis's perspective. I can very much understand things from Max's perspective. But I think it is what it is. I think the penalty was just. You know, I think he should have gotten at least something for that. That's a really messed up thing to do, given all those, and again, I say this all the time, given all those circumstances. And I think the other point I'm going to make, I'll just handle at the end of once we go through the entire race as well. But for that reason, you know, it's just like, I get it. It is what it is. I'm so thankful that Max is actually okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think at the end of the day,
that was the biggest thing. Like, I literally, I don't know about you, but I had like kind of flashes of Grosjean in that moment.
100%.
And I was just like, I'm just so glad that he was fine and he walked away from that.
I think that that's the most important part, and you're right, cooler heads will always prevail in terms of like, I was really upset yesterday, but I also like, I wanted to hear everybody's point of view, and I posted on Instagram, and I got like a great couple of conversations going. People who really just felt that Lewis as a champion should, he is very aggressive, and this is the point I'm making. In the post interviews, he mentioned that Max is an aggressive driver, and he mentioned it in poor taste. And the reason that bothered me is because, you know, Max is an aggressive driver, but so is Lewis. Lewis is kind of that person who doesn't give up. We've seen it time and time again. Like I said, with Albon twice, he's been in a position where he has ruined the race of Albon, and it's because we all want, when we're at the front, we all want to win, and we'll do kind of anything to win sometimes. And I feel like that's Lewis, but he has to understand that drive exists in all other drivers, and you have to augment when to back off. And when you're ahead, like if Lewis was ahead and Albon was trying to get past him, all right, well, I mean, racing incident, call it what you want to call it. But when it's Max is ahead, then he kind of is like, well, Max is an aggressive driver. And that bothered me because you guys are both aggressive drivers. And like we know, Max could have backed off. Everyone says he could have left him more room. He could have done this. But at the time where you're not ahead and it wasn't your time and you let your race get the best of you. And for that reason, I can't understand how this was just a racing incident to some people. Explain it to me more if you have to, but I believe that Lewis deserved to get a penalty, and I don't necessarily think the penalty was enough, but do I think he should like be excluded from having a race in the future? No, I think that something I would have agreed more with is like a drive-through penalty.
I think the statement Lewis made that Max is aggressive is probably, that's like the pot call, no pun intended, but the pot calling the kettle black here. You're a Formula One driver. You
You're
don't
aggressive.
get to Formula. You don't even get to Formula 3.
The
You don't get to. I busted open like that's 30.
Yeah.
You don't get to Formula driving without being aggressive.
You're right. I'm sorry. It was really funny.
You know what I mean? So it's like, for him to, like, you're all aggressive drivers. What are you talking about? Lewis is, like, probably one of the most aggressive drivers I've seen in Formula One, period.
Kimi is a very aggressive
They're
driver.
all aggressive. Like, what are you talking about, Max?
Fernando
But
Alonso is an aggressive driver.
For him to say is, like, yes, Verstappen is a, like, very aggressive driver. Everyone's aggressive. You just you just haven't liked the aggression.
Yeah.
I think maybe to a certain extent, Lewis, dare I say, can't handle his aggression. I think Max's aggression is what lets him wins races. And like a lot of these guys were talking about it, they were saying like throughout all these races.
Are you
like,
okay?
I'm freaking like I'm fired up, dude.
You're not enunciating your words anymore.
You know what it is? I'm talking and I'm getting a lot of like saliva. And it's like, really, why are you asking me these questions? I have to admit these embarrassing things that I'm like.
Because people can hear you slurring your words.
Yeah, they're gonna think I'm. Wow, I'm swearing. Okay, Jesus. All right.
Sorry, Mom.
I think. Well, what a lot of people were saying. See, it's better now. What a lot of because I swallowed. What a lot of people were saying was that over these past few races, Lewis has been like conceding to Verstappen. Okay, Priya has the giggles now.
I'm good. I'm fine. Everything's okay. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes maybe shit.
Oh God.
He's been conceding.
They say these last few races, Lewis has like backed down from Verstappen, and that's why he's been losing, according to these people.
Now it's the slap back.
And then they're like, oh, now he's not backing down, But it's like an arm wrestle, right? Like it's like Verstappen and Lewis are arm wrestling. And Verstappen's like his aggression is what helps him win the arm wrestles. And sure, Lewis can fight back if he wants, but I think a part of him is just, I think he's been so dominant for so long that he is not used to the fight. I'll be quite honest. He is not used to being in second place. He is not used to another driver really pushing him this hard. He is not used to not having the best car on the grid. And I think all those things really combined, and he's just like, I think it's really pushed Lewis into a place where he's just like, and I'm not saying that like this is a bad thing on Lewis. I think Lewis did what Lewis needed to do to, put himself in the position he needed to be in. And quite frankly, it's very unfortunate that Max suffered the consequences of that. But when push comes to shove, when you have two alpha drivers driving like this, and, even the commentators were saying it, they're like, they finally... they're like, it was bound to happen. They were going to collide, and they did. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I kind of understand it now. And it's such a divisive thing because there is no right or wrong here. It's just what I think is going to happen when you have two drivers of their caliber driving at the level that they're driving at. I don't know what you think about that.
I know, I think you're right. A lot of the drivers actually said that they thought this was going to happen. They saw it firsthand. Bottas was saying he could see that they were aggressively racing each other, and he was just expecting it to happen. Something was going to happen. He almost like predicated it. I feel that they're both great drivers, and I think a lot of people also said, well, everyone's kind of just like ticked off at Lewis because he's the best and he's been champion and they just feel he should retire. But see, that's an extreme. I don't feel that he should retire.
That's ridiculous.
I don't feel that because he's been winning so long, he doesn't deserve to win anymore. And I have heard some people be like, it's time for someone else to win. It's not up to us. It's not up to you. It's not up to the drivers to decide when is there a time for a new champion. If Lewis is able to drive at number one, doesn't matter if it's in the number one car. At the end of the day, he is the one with the most points at the end of the season, and he deserves world champion. And I will stick to that. But my problem comes in when people make these like kind of very polarized or very like one-sided conversations. I believe that Max is at the point in his career where he can challenge Lewis, where he can challenge him for the world champion. I don't want Lewis to just concede or just give it to him because
he's got to go after it.
He's got to deserve it. But you also have to be fair to the person who's challenging you. You can't just kind of. We all have to admit in one way, shape, or form, and if you don't want to admit it yet, that's fine, that Lewis is favored by the FIA. He is favored by Formula One. He is the favorite. He's the golden boy. Yeah. He has such a great story. And if you think about it, it's a beautiful one.
And he's the greatest Formula One driver we've ever seen.
And it's
obviously
amazing.
They're going to...
Right place, right time. All of the things we've talked about before with the outliers.
And to your point on this, you see this across all sport.
Yeah.
You see it with Cristiano Ronaldo in soccer. You see it with LeBron James in the NBA.
Michael Jordan.
You see, I mean, I don't know. Like, you do see, I mean, I didn't watch, I was a kid when Jordan played. You see it with some of the greatest hockey players. You see it across all sports. This happens in all sports. You can't help it.
You know, Fernando Alonso was at the top of his game, and now he's obviously, back in, and he doesn't maybe necessarily deserve to be at the top of the grid because he's not earning it, and he's not in a car that can provide that to him. My problem, and what I was saying was that I need to say this part, Lewis's story speaks so much to just a dream. Like he didn't have the most money.
Yeah.
He is the minority in Formula One racing.
He has the Cinderella story.
He does, and he worked for that. His parents worked for that. He worked for that. You see all these really cute videos of him growing up, and you hear his dad talking about how he sacrificed so much,
worked like 3 jobs
to pay for this billionaire's boy sport, which Lewis didn't have that upbringing,
And he makes it all the way to become the greatest.
The greatest of the greatest of the greatest. Yeah. And so all of that, I feel like, should not be a question. And I'm tired of hearing that if you're a Max fan, you have to hate on Lewis, and if you're a Lewis fan, you have to hate on Max.
Yeah.
This specific circumstance is truly just a matter of what I felt like, not right or wrong, black or white, but this gray area where I feel like the FIA needs to have a little bit more consistency with how they penalize their drivers.
Yeah.
And they need to have repercussions that match the actual problem. I'm not saying like if someone goes off and crashes and someone who just goes off, it needs to be 2 very different penalties, but it does suck that, Max sustained a 51 G-force accident. I
think they need rules.
They do, and like even like track limits has come into question and all this stuff. Like, where are the consistencies? Where are the readouts of why we got here?
But you know what? They do have rules when it comes to overtaking on straights. You're not allowed to weave. You have to pick a racing line. Once you make one move, you have to stick to that move.
Yeah.
And they need to make. I feel like there needs to be made a rule about corners too.
If
you're not in front. If it's, I don't know if you can talk about laps, but if you're not in front, you don't have the racing line, and you're going through a corner, there should be certain rules that the drivers have to adhere to.
And I think you're right, and I think the reason I feel that way is because I feel like we're seeing this quite often. I feel like we're seeing this more often than not, and I just think that that's what's upsetting is that the reason it's so polarized is because it's Max and Lewis. It's the two headers for the championship.
If it was Russell and Raikkonen, no one would care.
But they should. Yeah. They should, though, and that's the problem. I feel.
Although when it was Russell and Bottas, everybody cared.
Yeah.
When he decided to play bumper cars with the homeboy.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
And so with that all being said, I feel that there needs Toto, will get to him in a second.
Toto
there
Wolff
needs
cared.
to be rules in place, and I feel like they need to get in place now because the next young generation of drivers is coming up too. We got Yuki Tsunoda, we got Gasly, we have the Haas drivers, which may or may not stick around. They need to know that if they're going to rise in their ranks, there are going to be repercussions to poor behavior. The funny thing about Toto Wolff that killed me yesterday is when he messages Michael Massi. And
Michael,
he's like,
I just sent you an email. Did you see my email? Michael Massi's like,
bro.
I don't check my emails during races.
Because we're trying to focus on the race. I died. And then when Christian Horner went on, He literally, like, sometimes I love and sometimes I hate Massi. The way he talks to people is like so demeaning sometimes, but he's also just kind of like speaking the actual logical truth.
Yeah, like.
And but it bothers me a little bit that he doesn't sit in with the stewards on what their decision is. Like, he doesn't sit in with them on their discussion. And the reason I don't really understand that is Michael Massi. He's like, he said that about the one with the penalties. He's like, well, I wasn't in the stewards area, and I'm like, but shouldn't you be?
No, he shouldn't.
No?
No.
Okay.
Because the stewards are supposed to be completely unbiased and impartial.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
Never mind.
So
I take that back.
That's they're supposed to be.
So, I mean, and then, I don't know, I feel like before we get to the rest of the race, I just want to kind of end this Max Lewis debacle.
Yeah.
It bothered me so much to hear, and it actually really upset me this morning, and to hear that Lewis sustained such abrasive, abusive remarks about his race after this. It's so unnecessary. I love Max Verstappen. I want him to win the champion. There's no if, and, or but around it. There is no way, shape, or form that anything from the racing track should ever enter belittling a driver based on their race, their sex, anything.
You know what? We don't need to like entirely go into this, but from what I've heard, because I have family in Europe, I know, because one thing I was hearing is they're saying that they're like the racism in F1 is an issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, I don't even want to get into this much, but from what I've heard, I think racism in Europe is a really bad issue. I mean, I've visited there. I think Priya lived there for a little while. I've heard from a lot of my family who are also like Sikhs in England. My parents live there. My dad said the same thing too, that like racism is like an issue in Europe. And I don't think so. And the only reason I bring this up is because I've heard like commentary being said that there's a racism issue in Formula One. I don't think there's a racism issue in Formula One, because Formula One really is a global sport, and globally, like, minorities are the majority globally, if you actually think about it. I think there's actually a racism issue in Europe,
which is where F1 is centralized.
Which is where, and I am saying F1's a global sport, but I think a good majority of the fan base is European, and I think that's where a lot of these racist things, I don't want to say like, I think that has something to do with it. But yeah, I obviously can't agree more. Like, regardless of what happened, whatever you think, it has nothing to do with race. And it has nothing, I don't understand why people would say those things. It's driver versus driver, team versus team, Formula One racing, that's the bottom line.
And the fact that like somebody's like integrity and had to
it's
be
just
brought
so
into
stupid.
that, it's very dumb, and it really
it's
takes
ignorance.
away, it takes away from the sport. It takes away from the
actual
rivalry
issue at hand,
and
too.
It just really took away from the issue at hand.
Yeah.
So with that said, I wanted to make that very clear, because I feel like it's such a polarized issue that if you believe in Max, it's like you're against Lewis. My heart as a Sikh woman went out to Lewis, because I have experienced certain issues in my life where I've been in England and I've had family in England, and I can only imagine that his Cinderella story was thwarted by really horrific things that were said to him. So from my perspective, and I know Cam, I can speak for Cam, that was heartbreaking to hear. But the race went on,
Yeah.
So after that 10-second penalty, of course, which Lewis served during a pit stop, which didn't feel very long, it was crazy to see. Leclerc was in first.
Leclerc was leading the whole race.
Oh my God.
Until the last, I think, few laps. And we saw Leclerc within the race. He was reporting over the radio that he was having losses of power due to his power unit, his engine. I didn't read too much yet. It's only been a day as to what was going on, but he was having some kind of engine issues and losing power, and that was slowing him down. He was losing tenths at a time as Lewis was catching up to him. And as we all know, if you did watch the race, Lewis eventually did catch him and overtake him to win the British Grand Prix.
Just want to say for a second, though, damn, Leclerc pulled that off. I mean, even when the race was red flagged to fix the tire barrier that Max flew into, or his car flew into, rather, I was like telling Cam, I was like, oh, yeah, Leclerc's in, P1, and Cam was like, oh, it's only a matter of time. He did an amazing job. That's your dark horse. Like, just pulling, like, pushing.
Leclerc is such a, like, fantastic driver. I can't say enough about Leclerc. And, I mean, to that point, like, we don't have to touch on this anymore, but, like, he went through Cops with Perez, exact same scenario.
Hamilton.
No, he went through with Perez. It was Perez. He went through with Perez, and
Perez was in 20th.
Was it Perez or was it Hamilton?
It was Hamilton. Leclerc went through it with.
Why am I'm thinking of another.
You're thinking
race,
of another. You're thinking of the race
before. He went through with Hamilton. Hamilton didn't hit him, but he did go a little wide and get into the gravel and got a little bit of a wobble, and it is what it is. I don't, there's a lot of speculation as to what, maybe it was he didn't. But everyone drives differently too. Max is maybe aggressive, meaning like, he's not afraid to be wheel to wheel, like literally on somebody's front wing through a corner.
Hey guys, and
Leclerc, I don't know, but
Norris, Ricardo goes wheel to wheel all the time. He's a late breaker. Yeah. So everybody has their style. It's just like, I feel like it shouldn't be that just when your style doesn't meet the other drivers that you get the wrong end of the stick. But I was kind of gutted for Pierre Gasly because just 5 laps before the end of the race, he had a puncture and he was out. Like he went into P11. It was just terrible. Vettel was out. I mean, the Vettel that you see picking up garbage at the racetrack after.
Gem.
He is such an amazing human.
What a gem.
I adore him. He's just a great human. He's an angel.
Protect him at all costs.
Protect that man at all costs.
So we finished up the race. We had Hamilton, P1, Leclerc second, Bottas third, Norris fourth, Ricciardo fifth, and Sainz in sixth.
What a time.
Norris definitely putting up the numbers again, proving that he is a force to be reckoned with. And I'm really happy to see again, we see Ricciardo putting the papaya McLaren up into the top 5 there. So I'm really interested to see, usual stuff, hopefully Max is okay, heals up. But I'm really excited to see what Leclerc, Norris, and Ricciardo have in store. Those are some really interesting drivers this year.
Sainz and Norris kind of get the short ends of their stick during their races, and they both talked about it really well in the post-race. Their pit stops were poor. That doesn't happen a lot for McLaren, I'll be honest with you. So it was really, and I loved the way that Sainz and Norris said, it doesn't happen often for our team. So it's bound to happen once in 20 plus races.
It is what it is. Yeah.
But his slow stop definitely cost him from leading Bottas because he would have, I really truly feel he would have taken it.
Yeah.
Perez had a horrible race. Starting from the back of the grid and just unable to get into the point. So he changed his tires.
If you take sprint quality out of that, though, probably would have been a different story.
And then he changed his tires and took fastest lap so that he could keep that from Hamilton, which I think was great, although he doesn't get the points for that.
They needed it.
But that's it. I just, it was like kind of a somber day for like most of the drivers, but I was really proud to see like Bottas, Lando, Sainz get into it. One
small note that I took. Tom Cruise, dude, what are you doing in the Mercedes garage? What is that guy doing there? Jumping on couches? Trying to tell people to believe in Scientology and aliens?
Odd.
What's wrong with this guy?
Some of them, like, people, was it Ford was there?
Harrison Ford was in the Williams garage,
It's just so odd. It was, and then for the longest time, they wouldn't cut away from Tom Cruise and Harrison Ford, and we're like, we want to watch the race.
Yeah, they were chatting.
And it was so funny because I think Crofty was like, well, we don't know what they're saying because they've got masks on. And I was just dying laughing.
I don't have anything against celebrities or any, like, whatever.
It was funny, though.
But it was just hilarious to see Tom Cruise there. But yeah, Lewis is so connected with so many
Oh, I
celebrities.
know.
It's
He's got
nuts.
like everybody.
Yeah.
Did you? Oh, by the way, not speaking of Lewis, but speaking of Max, do you remember during the sprint quali when his tires were literally on fire? Like, why do we look up when we say fire? That's so weird.
Yeah. That was so
That was
sick.
insane. It
That was
looked
a,
like
that was a sick
flame.
visual. It was a nice little precursor to what was to come. Like in that he was like, yo, he was literally on fire.
It was crazy.
It was so dope.
Thank God he wasn't actually
Not
on fire.
not literally, but like figuratively. He was literally, his car was literally on fire, and figuratively, the way he raced that sprint quali was so sick.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, but
Three
that
points,
was
right? 3 points?
I heard from somebody. I think they were saying in the commentary that he kind of did that on purpose to keep his tires as warm and hot as possible.
Obviously kept him hot. You're on fire.
So
it looked so cool. If you haven't gotten a chance to take a look, I think they have it up on the F1 site. Literally, you see a flame. It's crazy.
Like coming out of the tire.
It's so cool.
So
on a high note.
That's that.
So
that's our podcast. Man.
Next race that we have is gonna be my birthday weekend.
Mm-hmm.
What's the day before my birthday? So
yeah,
F1.
you had a race on. I had a race on my birthday, and you're gonna have a race on your birthday weekend too.
I'm excited.
So that's gonna be really fun.
That's gonna be hungry for hungry. And then we have a long break until the end of August in Belgium.
Yeah, they're taking a summer break.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, there's a summer break.
We will see you all.
So that's that. And this was a long one because we skipped so many. But make sure you guys subscribe we are on Spotify, we're on YouTube. On both of them, search for F1 My Life podcast, and you should find it. Make sure you subscribe to the F1 My Life podcast channel. I can't speak. Why can't I speak?
I know.
Make sure you subscribe to the F1 My Life podcast channel. Originally, I was posting them on my personal YouTube channel, but make sure you guys subscribe to the other channel just because it just didn't make sense for me to post stuff there. Subscribe on Spotify as well. You can catch the audio version on there. And thank you to everybody who's been listening, supporting, and talking. And if you are interested in F1, let us know and reach out. It's been fun to have friends
and
family
really
nice. Reach out and tell us they're into F1. I love talking to all my friends who are into F1 about Formula One. It's been really awesome. So
I have been putting a lot of stuff on my page, on my personal page and Instagram, and I would love to connect with more people on the Formula One community and the Formula One community.
Yeah.
So you can at me at Priya Mudhar, and so that's Priya Mudhar. Super easy, no numbers, no spaces, none of that craziness. But feel free to kind of chat me in there, and you'll get kind of some glimpses into sneak peeks. And of course, during racing day, we always try to post something fun, our real reactions, and usually it's just me yelling in the background.
Yep, same.
Oh,
cool.
Your ad is at Priya Mudhar?
My at is at cam.mudhar. On Instagram.
See you there.
Hit me there. So that's it. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye.